Okay, good afternoon. This is September 9th, 2012, Katipunan, 3rd annual in Niles, Illinois, outside Chicago. And Mr. Al McLuckie has been kind enough to consent to do an interview with me. And we'll get more on the background a little bit later. But Al, can I ask you what first you got you into martial arts?
Actually, when I was a kid, probably movies and television. Peter Lorre used to play an Oriental detective named Mr. Moto. Right. I can remember being 9 years old watching him judo flip gangsters in old black and white movies. I thought that was cool. And then other shows like The Wild Wild West or The Green Hornet sparked an interest, so I got into it shortly after high school.
And what was your first formal training in martial arts?
Well, my first style was Taekwondo, and I had a choice between Shorei-ryu and Taekwondo. So I made the wise choice of Taekwondo because it had a ring to it, as opposed to Shorei-ryu. That was the level of insight I had at that time about what to train in. So I did about 2 years of Taekwondo, about 2 years of Goju Kai, and about 6-7 months of Shorin-ryu karate before I got exposed to the Filipino martial arts in '77.
Okay, so you were training in
'76 actually.
'76, okay. And what was your first exposure to the Filipino martial arts?
Well, I was a Bruce Lee admirer, and I had read that his top student was a man named Dan Inosanto who did different Filipino martial arts as well as Jeet Kune Do. And so I tried to research at the time just through magazines, the Filipino stuff. So I ordered a Super 8 film that Angel Cabales had put out on his Serrata system. Right. And I worked from that, trying to copy the movements for about 3 months in Fort Wayne, Indiana. Then coincidentally, or maybe not coincidentally, I met a guy who was a student of Angel's and Mike Inez, who had just moved to Fort Wayne. And we met in a karate school, and I could see from the way he was sparring people and kind of dominating them, even though he was, fairly short, that he did a different style than karate. So I asked him, what do you do? He told me stick fighting, and I said, really? I just bought a film of a stick fighting master. And he said, who? I said, Angel Cabales. He said, oh, that's my teacher. So from California to Fort Wayne, I met Gary Bolds, who got me into the Filipino martial arts, which I studied with him about a year and then moved out west and trained with people like Mike Inez and some other eskrima people and some kung fu people.
Okay, very nice. And then just a little bit more about your martial arts experience. With you focused on at least three martial arts systems. You focused on Filipino arts. You focused on Indian arts, and also the last number of years you've been training in Systema, which is a Russian martial art.
Right.
And briefly, how do you feel? What have you learned from each, or how do you feel they complement each other?
Well, I think all of them can complement each other. Serrata was my base system, followed by the Inosanto blend and then Pakiti Tercia. And then I trained with different practitioners and teachers of Balintawak, Ilustrísimo style, some Doce Pares. There's things I loved about every Filipino system I ever trained in. And several Silat systems, several internal martial arts, Xingyi, Tai Chi, and also Indian martial arts from a teacher named Ghansham Jainagarkar, who was from India and taught Lati, which is Indian staff fighting. I also studied Indian dance with him and yoga. All that stuff went through my blender, and I was teaching for 9 years at Fred's Dagerberg School, which is where I met Nate Defensor, and that was like it was a martial art candy store. Fred used to have over 40 different systems taught under the roof at one point. So I got to see a lot of systems, and pick and choose what I wanted to train in. In 1998, I was exposed to the Russian martial arts Systema, and someone gave me some videotapes of the training methods, and after studying them for about 5 months, I went up to Toronto and trained with Vladimir Vasiliev in his school and really liked it, and have been teaching and training in it ever since, although I don't limit myself to any one thing in particular. and they're highly complementary to each other, the Russian systems and the Filipino systems. Those are two arts that were born on the battlefield and are currently being used in various theaters of combat. So they both have some common threads. And
sorry. Okay, sorry about that. Okay, so you're saying common threads. Okay, with the very good. And with how do you see? So you've been doing martial arts for
about 40 years.
About 40 years. It's a good chunk of time. And with how do you see? What do you see trends in martial arts today, or how would you categorize trends in martial arts today? We'll say every decade has different martial arts trends, and different systems become popular, and some other systems we'll say become not quite as popular. You know, both positive and maybe less positive and negative. How would you see things?
Well, I'd say you could group them into a number of different categories. Now, obviously, you have sport martial arts, which would be dominated by MMA, even over boxing or karate. I'm a big fan of it. I think it's a phenomenal melting pot of, testing under fire certain things. But on the other hand, it doesn't give a person everything you would need to survive, say, in a street fight or weapons fight or multiple opponent fight. But the argument that, let's say, the MMA versus a self-defense system, to me that's a false argument, because they're actually two parts of a whole idea of training. So you've got the sport aspect, you've got the military aspect like Krav Maga. Systema would be part of that, I guess. Then you have the classical systems, which are still very popular, like Taekwondo or Shotokan or various. And then you have the grappling system, which are obviously popular. And then you have another category of martial arts, which is bigger than ever, the show business style, the type that they, adapt for movie fight scenes. Sometimes people will get into a martial art and they're picking the wrong art for their goals. So they might want to learn self-defense, so they get into a sportive art, and they learn the wrong type of strategies and mindsets. On the other hand, you could hide within a self-defense art and think that you never have to do any hard sparring because, no, I'm a warrior and I only practice deadly knife fighting. But if you never feel it under pressure, so I don't believe in the argument that one of those is better than the other. They're just simply different potential ways for a person to train.
So in other words,
unless you're trying to get into show business, then you want to do the flashiest, most.
So in other words, your feeling is that different martial arts are good for different purposes. There is not necessarily no right or wrong. It's just what your goals are. What your goals are. Yeah, what your goals. Okay.
If you just want fitness, do Tai Bo. It might not help you in self-defense, but it'll get you aerobically pumped up.
Okay. And in terms of what are you focusing on in your own training? What do you feel is important when you're training, a daily, weekly basis?
Well, from the Russian systems, I do quite a lot of joint mobility training. For example, you take every joint in the body and you move it in infinity signs in different planes of motion. Mm-hmm. That causes more synovial fluid to be pumped into the joint capsule, and it keeps you feeling rather mobile and without having to stretch or whatever. Mm-hmm. I do some breathing exercises and tension exercises from Systema, where you're tensing different muscle groups with different breathing patterns, and just a lot of movement training. In terms of weapon training, 90% of the practice I do is with extremely heavy pipes or heavy hardwood sticks, tire irons, things like that. I don't, unless I'm training with another person where I might use heavy rattan. I like to train with a heavy weapon. I just feel that, one thing about training with light weapons, it gives you an illusion of speed because you're able to manipulate a light stick with your wrist. And then if you have to pick up a real weapon, it feels like it weighs 10 pounds. So I'm a big proponent of practicing with heavy weapons and getting the entire body into the motions and whatever, so you won't be, again, overwhelmed by the weight and density of a heavy stick or pipe that you might have to use. That's about it.
Okay. And just final question, Al. What advice would you have for a beginning martial arts student?
Basically, educate yourself and, you know, just check out a training school or facility, see if it feels like it has a friendly, open spirit or mood or attitude to it. You know, don't give don't give someone too much credit if they have a title and they're, you know, saying they're a grandmaster or grand champion or whatever. Just take stuff with a grain of salt. You don't ever let go of your own judgment in terms of looking at something, because there are a lot of people that are BS artists basically, and they may have a successful school or a title or a reputation, but basically don't forget to lose sight of your own inner judgment and gut instinct basically. And look for the right art that fits what your goals are, whether it's fitness or self-defense or sport or, you know, aesthetic value or whatever.
Okay, very good. I appreciate your time. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right. Let's close.